Maya Delgado arrived at the hospital before the sun was fully up. That was nothing new. She had been doing that for almost 2 years, ever since she got her nursing license and walked through those glass doors on her very first day, heart pounding, hands steady. She liked the early morning shift. She liked the quiet of the corridors before the building filled with voices and footsteps. She liked being the first one to check on her patients, to see how they had slept, to ask them simple questions that made them feel like real people instead of room numbers. She was 27 years old. She was not tall, not loud, not the kind of person who walked into a room and made everyone turn around. But her patients noticed her. They always noticed her. Not because of anything dramatic she did, but because of the small things. She remembered their names. She remembered the names of their children. She remembered who was nervous about a procedure and who pretended to be fine when they were not. She had a way of sitting beside someone who was frightened and making them feel, without many words, that they were not alone. That Friday morning, she moved through her rounds the same way she always did, quietly, carefully, with full attention. She checked charts, adjusted pillows, answered questions, and made sure every patient had what they needed before the day got busy. By 9 o'clock, the ward was humming with the usual activity. Doctors made their rounds. Breakfast trays came and went. Phones rang at the nurses' station. Maya was updating a patient file at her desk when one of the other nurses, a kind woman named Rosa, walked past and gave her a look that was hard to read. A look that said something without saying anything. Maya glanced up, but Rosa had already moved on. At 10:15, Maya was called to the office of the director of nursing. Her name was Patricia Hale. She was a woman in her 50s who wore her authority like a coat she never took off. She always spoke carefully, choosing words the way someone chooses tools, for their specific use, not for warmth. When Maya entered the office and saw the woman from Human Resources already seated in the corner, she felt something shift in her stomach. The kind of shift that tells you, before your mind catches up, that something is wrong. She sat down. Patricia Hale spoke for about 4 minutes. She used phrases like performance concerns and team communication, and a pattern of behavior that does not align with our expectations. She did not give specific examples. When Maya asked for them, she was told the decision had already been reviewed. When Maya asked whether any of this was connected to a chart she had documented 3 days ago, a chart where she had noted her concern about a patient's medication dosage, she was told that was not relevant to this conversation. She was handed an envelope. Inside was a termination letter. She was informed that her access badge would stop working at noon. She was told she could take her personal items, and that someone would walk with her to make sure the process went smoothly. Maya sat with that envelope in her hands for a moment. She looked at it. She looked at the 2 women across from her. Then she nodded, stood up, said thank you, because she had been raised to be polite even when the world was not polite to her, and walked out. She did not cry in the office. She waited until she reached the stairwell, where nobody was. She sat on a concrete step and let herself have a few quiet minutes. She thought about her mother, who had worked 2 jobs to keep their small apartment in South Tucson. She thought about nursing school, the long nights, the exams, the moment she passed her boards and called her mother from the parking lot of the testing center. She thought about the patient in room 308 who had whispered to her last week, "You are the only one who really listens." She thought about the medication chart. She had been right. The dosage had been too high for that patient's kidney function. She had raised it with the attending physician, Dr. Carl Weston, who had dismissed her without looking up from his paperwork. She had documented her concern in the chart anyway, because that was the correct thing to do. The patient had developed a complication that night. The dosage was adjusted. The patient recovered fully. Dr. Weston had never said a word to her after that. Not a thank you, not an acknowledgement, just silence. And then, 3 days later, this. She wiped her face, stood up, and went to gather her things. She packed a small cart. A little plant she had kept on her desk for over a year. A tough little succulent that survived on almost nothing. A framed photograph of her mother, taken on a beach trip they had saved for 2 summers in a row. A small handwritten card from a patient. She tucked that card into her coat pocket without reading it again, because she already had it memorized. She pushed the cart down the hallway toward the elevator. She pressed the button for the ground floor. The doors opened, the doors closed, and she rode down in silence. When the elevator opened into the lobby, she stepped out and began moving toward the main exit. She was maybe 30 feet from the doors when she heard them open. Not one person, not two. A group, large, moving together, filling the entrance with a presence that made several people in the lobby look up from their phones and their paperwork. 14 men walked in from the morning light. They were broad and quiet, and they moved with the kind of calm that belongs to people who have trained themselves not to waste energy on anything unnecessary. Some of them had the look of the outdoors still on them. Some moved carefully, the way people move when their bodies have been through something and are still remembering it. They were military. Anyone who looked at them for more than 2 seconds could see that. Maya stopped walking. She knew these men. Not all of them well, but she knew their faces. They were members of a special operations unit based at a facility near the city. Over the past several weeks, a handful of them had come through the ward for medical treatment. Injuries, follow-ups, procedures. She had been their nurse. She had been one of their nurses anyway, but she had been the one who stayed. The man at the front was named Darius Cole. He was in his early 40s, not especially tall, but built like a person who had spent decades becoming exactly what he needed to be. He had a steady face and careful eyes, and he did not look like a man who did things for show. He walked to the reception desk and spoke to the clerk there. "We're looking for a nurse," he said. "Maya Delgado. She works on the 3rd floor." The clerk looked at her screen. Then she looked up, uncertain. "I'm sorry," she said. "Miss Delgado is no longer. She's actually—" She stopped, because Maya was standing right there, 10 feet away, with a cart and a plant and her coat on, watching all of this happen. Darius Cole turned. He saw her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he crossed the lobby and extended his hand. "We heard you were leaving today," he said. "We wanted to come before you were gone." Maya shook his hand. She did not know what to say, so she said nothing. What happened next was not organized. It was not rehearsed. It was simply 14 men, one after another, in a hospital lobby, saying something real to one woman who had not expected to hear anything kind that morning. One of them had come in 6 weeks ago, with a shoulder injury he had been ignoring for too long. He had told Maya it was fine. She had asked him, quietly and away from the group, whether he was being completely honest with her. He had paused for a long time before admitting that it was not fine at all. Because she had asked the right question at the right moment, he had received the correct treatment. His shoulder had healed properly. He told her that. Another had received test results while he was alone in a room, waiting. The results were not clear. They pointed in a direction that needed more investigation. It was the kind of news that sits in the chest like a stone. Maya had been passing by when she noticed his expression through the window. She had come in, sat down beside him, and stayed for 20 minutes. She did not interpret the results. She did not offer false comfort. She simply made sure he did not have to sit with that feeling by himself. He had told his wife about her afterward. He told Maya that, now. A third had been planning to skip a follow-up procedure because he did not want to slow down his unit. He felt that resting was the same as failing. Maya had not lectured him. She had just asked him one question. If one of his own men came to him and said he was thinking about skipping necessary medical care, what would he tell that man? He had gotten the procedure. He stood in the lobby and told her that question had stayed with him. They all spoke simply and without exaggeration, the way people speak when they mean every word and have no interest in performing. Maya listened to all of them. She did not look away. She did not try to fill the silence between one person finishing and the next beginning. She just listened, and when each one finished, she said his name and she thanked him, and she meant it completely. Somewhere in the middle of all of this, 3 other patients appeared in the lobby. They had nothing to do with the military men. They were ordinary patients. One elderly woman in a wheelchair, one man who was being discharged that very day and was still in his hospital clothes, one woman who had heard from a nurse upstairs what was happening and had made her way down. They did not say much. They simply stood nearby, in that quiet way that people stand when they want to show that they are on someone's side. Word moved through the hospital, the way it always moves through a place where people work closely together and know each other's business. By the time an hour had passed, the story had reached every floor. The HR manager, who had been in the termination meeting that morning, appeared briefly in the lobby doorway, looked at what was in front of her, and disappeared again. Somewhere on the third floor, Dr. Carl Weston was told what was happening downstairs, and he continued seeing patients without visibly reacting, though the nurses around him noticed that he was quieter than usual for the rest of the day. When everything had been said, Darius Cole looked at Maya and asked her what she planned to do next. It was a direct question, the kind he probably asked often, without extra words around it. She told him honestly that she was not sure yet. "You'll land somewhere good," he said. It was not meant as encouragement for its own sake. It was a statement, the kind a person makes when they have seen enough of the world to know the difference between someone who will be fine and someone who will not. The men left the same way they had arrived, together, quietly, without making more of the moment than it already was. They had somewhere to be, as they always did. Maya stood in the lobby for a moment after they were gone. The woman in the wheelchair reached out and touched her arm. Maya looked at her, recognized her from the fourth floor, and smiled. The woman did not say anything. She just nodded, the way people nod when words would only get in the way. Maya pushed her cart the rest of the way to the exit and walked out into the morning. She spent the weekend with her mother. They cooked together and watched old films, and did not talk too much about what had happened, because sometimes the best thing about being with someone who loves you is that you do not have to explain yourself. On Saturday afternoon, Maya sat on the back steps with a cup of tea and read the card from her patient again. She had read it many times by now. It still said the same thing it had always said. You were the only one who really listened. She kept it. On Monday morning, her phone rang. It was a number she recognized, the hospital's administrative line. The voice on the other end was careful and formal, and said that the board had requested a review of the circumstances surrounding her departure, and that they would like to speak with her at her earliest convenience. She said she would think about it. On Tuesday, a letter arrived. It was from a member of the hospital board she had never spoken to personally. It was short. It said that it appeared the institution had made an error in judgment, and that they hoped she would be willing to discuss returning to her position. She took 2 more days. Then she called back and said yes. She returned to the third floor on a Thursday morning, arriving before the sun was fully up, the same as always. Nobody made a speech. Nobody gathered in the hallway. She signed in, picked up her charts, and walked to the first room on her list. The patient inside was a man in his late 60s who had been admitted 2 days before she left. He looked up when she came in, a little surprised by her face. He had not seen her before. "Good morning," she said. "I'm Maya. I'll be taking care of you today." He nodded, still waking up. "Your chart says you have a daughter," she said, glancing at the notes. "It says she visited yesterday evening." He smiled, slowly, the way people smile when something unexpectedly pleasant comes toward them. "She did," he said. "She drove 3 hours." "That's a good daughter," Maya said. She pulled up the chair beside his bed, sat down, and began her morning assessment. Not hurrying, not distracted, giving him the full, careful attention she gave everyone. Outside the window, the city was waking up. The light was changing. The hospital was filling with the sounds of another day starting. Maya Delgado was back where she belonged.